Okay, so I'd love to switch gears totally at this point over to the operational question to make sure we loop back there. And the original question from Mary was, a lot of this is new to me as a content strategist. How might my role intersect with these processes? Would I be working with more data-focused roles as well, right? Implicit in everything we've been talking about is that content objects have to work with data. Aaron talked about that, Chris talked about that, Michael talked about that, Coraline has referenced that. So it's the idea that there's contextual information about the user that we need to work with and along with that content. And I'd love to hear, Chris, because we haven't heard from you in a little while, your thoughts on this idea. I'm sure you could speak to everything we just spoke to as well, but how do content strategists intersect with all of these processes, and then how do we need to work with data alongside content?
So typically content strategists, like I perform the role a lot of times dealing with content strategists as a back-end content strategist, right? So I work with a number of different content strategists. So fundamentally, it's about establishing like a common set of terms, naming and context and definitions and what they mean in our environment. And then in terms of working with data, in my experience, we've found it very effective to enable content strategists and let's say other product designers designing experiences around this content and data, right? To be able to understand what content objects or what data do they have available? What are the different content types? What are the different models? What does it going from articles to a video object to a YouTube video object, for example? And then how do they apply those content objects in the tasks they need to perform, right? How does a content strategist apply a content object, for example, in a content strategy, in a copy guide, in a copy plan, or in a messaging kind of portfolio, or a product designer? How does a product designer understand all the different content objects they can work with today, right? And then how do they apply that actually in the product design? And then really understanding then negotiating what are the gaps, right? What are the new objects that need to be created that the product designer or the content strategist has envisioned? So it's really serving kind of as that Rosetta Stone or translation, like layer between, let's say, a front-end content strategist, and let's say as a back-end content strategist and all the other back-end roles behind that, and establishing like a common understanding and a shared language between that, and really bringing the back-end complexity, right, in these content objects to allow them to understand what they have to work with and how then to apply it in their specific role.
Thank you, Chris. That's beautiful. It's talking about using shared artifacts to unify operations and different stakeholders like content strategists, both front end and back end, along with the UX folks and the customer experience designers, conversational designers. They need to have shared artifacts, and so it sounds like when we talk about the core content model, core semantic model, the reason we use that word core is because it's sort of central to the fabric of the shared teams that work with content across groups. Chadir Shopman posted in channel about, these systems kind of require serious investment. Chatbots are omnichannel. Why would we invest large amounts of money in maintenance of systems like this instead of just skipping that and serving out a single bot on multiple channels covering large parts of the customer journey? And I'm hearing that theme actually from everybody. Michael talked about, we got these many different channels and output formats, and we also have many different sources. We have 6 different CMSs and a lot of different things happening, and we're all getting it to a single point of queryable interface, like a single middle point for all of that, and pushing out to channels from there. I think a single chatbot is a good example of that. We have micro content in a super loaded way available. If you can make it available to a chatbot, why not make them a little longer and then make it article form or watch based or whatever? It's all content as a service. Aaron, could you reflect out loud a little bit about this meeting point between shared content models and systems and the folks that interact with them across a busy digital team that maybe have different things they're trying to do with that content. Some is in-game content, some are trying to sell more games to existing players. So, there's different uses of the content, and there's different product managers and content strategists involved. And how do they work with all of this stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting. As we've kind of developed a graph-based omnichannel strategy, we've seen, and Chris can maybe talk later to the roles that are implicated here, but it is a big change, and there's still, in terms of this technology discussions, inadequacies and gaps in the technology that need filling. Not all of them need to be addressed in big, expensive ways, to some of the observations before. And a lot of mileage these days is to be got from a headless CMS, but shared understanding of content architecture and its possibilities is one of those gaps, right? And I guess in a way, and this is certainly something you and I and others have discussed many times over the years, Krush, there still is no kind of unified standard for content models. All of these different logical expressions of a content model, everyone does it slightly differently. Every headless CMS has a slightly different content model setup, and it doesn't actually meet all stakeholder needs. It primarily meets operational needs in terms of defining structure and semantics of the content for a particular content type, like an article, but it tends to leave gaps in traditional content strategy and editorial roles, where you might have fields for where does this information come from? Who is responsible for it? Is there a deadline associated with it? And as a result, we've just continue to see that except for the formal content models that may be the machine readable content models that are going to be housed in a CMS or in a system like ours, nonetheless, the bulk of content modeling is done on spreadsheets of some variety or another. So anytime that something is a lot of spreadsheets and everybody does it, that's kind of a big technological gap. And it makes it's difficult too, and we're not quite there ourselves, but producing visually meaningful artifacts that all the different stakeholders can grok, right, and make sense of, because it tends to be boxes with arrows and dash lines and stuff like that, which aren't necessarily the most visually engaging. But even that is a step up from trying to read columns and rows in a spreadsheet. And I'll finally note that, from getting back to that content strategist question to which this relates, a kind of a big shift as you move towards omnichannel in a structured content world for traditional content strategists is the understanding that you're not dealing with web pages, right, or even screens, right, app screens. You're dealing with very flexible content, and what contemporary content strategists and content operations people need to understand and leverage is the flexibility of that, when traditional content strategy tends to be focused on producing singular artifacts that are then used in some sort of campaign or other way. And that really matters in terms of how you start to think of your content and its assembly, less as a blob where then all of the individual pieces need to be related to one another, and more as a collection of elements that can be mixed and matched over different content types, and mix and match, to Michael's point earlier, for different content endpoints, right? But it's still the same content. You're not duplicating it, which is the traditional approach to omnichannel content. We'll just make a copy for another system. You go in the change in thinking is around what can I assemble in this environment as opposed to this environment. This is the information I want to get across. How do I do it on a smart speaker versus how do I do it on a web page versus how do I do it, in our case, on a game console. And I'll finally note that having gone through this, we've changed process a lot too, where now content planning really starts with use case determination and requirements gathering. And that's been pretty transformational for us, where you get the stakeholders together, and rather than saying, what sort of content should we have, pose the question, what should this content do? And therefore, build backwards from that in terms of requirements.
Beautiful. Wow, that flow was incredible. The visual that was coming up in my mind as you were speaking, Aaron, is the horizontal and vertical dimensions of omni-channel content. There's a horizontal, which is the connective tissue and patterns that kind of help bring together cross-functional patterns around content, both from the semantic side and the structural side. And of course, we agree that there's a big gap on the ability to represent and manage content structure in technical systems. It's something we're working on. There's a vertical piece too that really, I think, goes to Mary's question about the individual content strategist and where they participate, because each practitioner, where the UX designer, conversational designer, content strategist, product manager, they're each having to work to apply patterns within their narrow focus on a particular customer interaction. They need to get a certain thing done for a certain kind of product group and a certain offer set or customer experience. And that is really a very significant dynamic within omnichannel. And Naz, I'd love it if you could reflect, with us on this dynamic between the shared artifacts across the group, the horizontal and patterns and whatnot, with the vertical kind of nature of content strategy, the customer journey, and each individual part of it that often gets addressed when we're putting content together for a campaign or a website or a collateral support for something that's happening. There's content folks working in a very vertical way. Can you talk a little bit about how those pieces come together?
That's fascinating that you refer to that as the horizontal and the vertical, because I actually would have had it the other way around. Yeah, I can see Michael nodding his head. So let's be clear what these two axes are, regardless of which one is horizontal or vertical. We have the customer journey, which is how the customer is going to move through answering a series of questions and addressing their content needs in order to accomplish something, whether they want to reschedule a flight, buy a car, change their mortgage, whatever it is. They are going on some sort of journey to achieve an objective, and they'll need content assets along the way. So all of us on this call have our different contributions to that. Some are going to be working more on the that kind of middle layer, I think, as Chris was saying, about back-end, front-end content strategists, who have to help create infrastructure, systems, platforms that are going to serve all of these many journeys for all of these different clients. And then those of us who are a bit more directly talking to specific commercial needs and specific customer profiles, who are researching a particular kind of user, particular area of usage. And there has to be this constant dialogue, and this is why we've got this event, is to make sure that there's this back and forth, so that we're not designing systems in the background due to what we feel are technical requirements. Well, what usually when we do that, it's based on what we were previously doing technically, and other people who are on the front end, or in another way on the cutting edge of where experience should be going, who are trying to shape the answers and shape the content and make the content do things for users, but there's this disconnect. So I think that we've got, and I was going to come back to Coraline on this, where I have an example. So we were working also with a different major European bank, and the head of systems there said, no chatbots are allowed in the building unless they integrate with my other backend data systems. So if the 5 criteria you have for eligibility for a loan are this 5 criteria. That has to be, those criteria have to be consistent, whether you're chatting, whether you're on the phone with somebody, whether you're looking at a web page, or whether the person on the phone is looking at an intranet page. That's the kind of the goal there. Whether you're designing this as part of a conversation, whether you're designing as part of a page, whether you're designing it as part of a knowledge base article that someone else is going to use to support a human conversation, we're all trying to find a way that we can keep our facts and our messages, as well as our branding and our tone of voice, straight. So I think that that's the design goal here, to bring these two worlds together of how do we categorize, how do we sort, filter, and find all this stuff, and then how do we make sure that all of those assets are in a form that can be picked up for the best, or the way that the user wants to interact with it. I'm not sure if that actually addressed your question, Chris, but that's what I come to when I think of these two axes come together.
Yeah, you know what I love about the axis issue is that it really is a graph, right? And so the axis, it's a two-dimensional thought, right? And so, but all of this stuff is ultimately a graph. At the end of the day, it's all a graph. So the axes actually pivot in relationship to each other. The relationship between the structural representation of the content or the content model, the semantic representations, the semantic model, right? Those are all nodes. And also really the different representations of content, right? The views on content, which go out to channels, those are all nodes. And so really what we're building is a big brain of content that ends up getting expressed through a service-based interaction out to the rest of the world. And so, that is a really important kind of directional frame to understand, is that all of this stuff is coming together, right? Omnichannel is an effect of many causes. All of them have to come towards a unified, coherent whole. And that takes teamwork. It takes a lot of teamwork.
To listen in on the full roundtable conversation and others, plus get access to more exclusive insight about omnichannel customer experiences, join the content order for free at simpleA.com.